Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor and distinct privilege to be here tonight to introduce one of those very special public figures who obviously need no introduction either here in Poland or internationally. But I hope President Kwasniewski will not disapprove my recalling some facts and to be delivered in headlines because of the time constraints imposed by the conference. So the very origin of this civic activity, which I remember very well, was in the 70s, when he was involved in a student movement combining both the grassroots actions with growing concern over the country. In the late 80s, after a few years in journalism, he was offered a position in the government, and soon, as the youngest leader of the pro-reform stream there, he became one of the architects of the historic roundtable talks of 1989. Those talks, along with the June parliamentary elections, as well as the establishment of the Solidarity-led government, triggered a chain reaction across the whole region, paving the way towards freedom, democracy, and market economy in Central and Eastern Europe. After that historic breakthrough of '89, generated by the Solidarity movement, during those 20 years of a free Poland, Aleksander Kwasniewski has passed through three major stages in his public life. During the first stage, until '95, he continued efforts aimed at strengthening of the democratic process in the country. He chaired a special commission in the Polish parliament that had a task of paramount importance to write a new constitution. The task was successfully accomplished, and a few years later, the parliament adopted the constitution. The second stage was the most visible and momentous. In 1995, he was elected president of the country, and 5 years later, he won again to serve another term in office until 2005. 4 strategic tasks fill his 10-year-long presidency. The first, to provide Poland lasting security through anchoring the country in NATO. The second, to foster Poland's full development by bringing the country in the European Union. The third, to promote good relations with all our neighbors and develop regional cooperation, as well as advocate from the within the open door policies both for NATO and EU. And the fourth task was to help continue and consolidate the Polish domestic transformation. Well, I had a particularly good opportunity in Washington, D.C. to follow and admire President Kwasniewski's endeavors aimed at bringing about the first round of NATO enlargement and subsequently the second round of that process. And also today, we might take for granted Central European countries' membership in the alliance. In the middle of the 90s, it was not that clear. In the last leg of Poland's marathon, which was very important because of the NATO ratification challenge in US Senate, President Kwasniewski's efforts were vigorously coupled with by Prime Minister Jerzy Buzek and his government. The inclusion of Poland, the Czech Republic and Hungary into the Euro-Atlantic community of free and democratic nations sharing the same values, President Kwasniewski embraced as the symbolic moral cancellation of the Yalta Order, an act which the then Secretary General Javier Solana called the triumph of justice over history. Subsequently, President Kwasniewski firmly championed an open-door policy for the alliance as well as EU. His support stemmed from the Polish feeling of solidarity with nations with whom the Poles had for decades shared the same lot and with whom they are now sharing the same aspirations. That approach also led President Kwasniewski to his widely recognized involvement in the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. His second presidential term saw also Poland's engagement in transatlantic relations deepening further. To a large extent, that was caused by September 11 and its implication, including the war on terror. And now, the third current stage of President Kwasniewski post-'89 activity began 5 years ago upon the successful conclusion of his decade in office. During this stage, he has remained very active and faithful to the goals and ideas that guided him over the previous years. He has focused further on the East as well on other post-communist countries. His involvement, however, reaches far beyond the East. A good example might be a conference promoting democratic change in Cuba, jointly initiated with former President Lech Wałęsa. And needless to say, he continues to be committed to the strengthening of transatlantic relations. Concluding my headlines, let me come back to our college years, and I'd like to say that Aleksander Kwasniewski has not changed since those days, and perhaps that might explain why he has achieved so much. Always greatly open-minded, fascinated by the world and people, able to attract and mobilize them, gifted in building bridges, focused on forward-looking solutions. And always, as far as I can remember, he knew that good ideas need not only wings, but also landing gear. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is in the spirit of those few remarks that I would like to introduce to you President Aleksander Kwasniewski.